What's going on, everybody? C4 here today. We're taking a look at some free agency winners and losers. It's pretty much dying down. There's still a couple big names out there. You got Hightower, who, with the rate that the Patriots have dominated free agency, he'll probably return there. You got TJ Lang, Jonathan Hankins, Benny Logan, Jay Cutler, Dontari Pogue, Kevin Minter, Jared Cook. Pretty much round out the list of guys that are still looking for homes. But for the most part, the dust has settled, and you pretty much have to wait for any potential trades that may happen, extensions, cuts, or, then you're pretty much just ready for the draft. So we're going to take a look at some winners and losers. And obviously, when you have losers, there's going to be fans of said teams watching this video. They're going to want to dislike, so I'm going to try to put a positive spin on the losers and say what I did like what they do. There's no team that has had a free agency period, unless you straight up haven't made a move, really, like the Raiders or anything like that, that haven't done at least something good. But for the losers, it's going to be teams that did more bad than good, I feel. Honorable mention will be the Dallas Cowboys. They didn't officially make the list as much as I would want them to. I just think, they were in a tough position anyway. They didn't have any cap to spend. They still are holding on to Tony Romo, which is a negative. They signed Nolan Carroll from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a bum. I think with Terrence Williams, what you pay with him, I mean, he's not bad. Terrence Williams is not bad. I think with that money, they should more so use it to address the defense. Hypothetically speaking, you probably could have got Mo Claiborne back for the money that you gave Terrence Williams. And I think if I'm a Cowboys fan, I'd rather Claiborne, even though he had a horrible playoffs, he still had a breakout season you could consider last year. Maybe he'll give a hometown discount to return to the Dallas Cowboys, and that would be a little bit beneficial. More so than, bringing back a Terrence Williams who's a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. But did not do enough to make the list. So I got 5 losers. And we got a bunch more winners than losers. But starting at number 1 for the losers, I have the Minnesota Vikings. The good, we'll start with the good, was they declined Adrian Peterson as an option. Obviously, you're going to pick up $18 million for his aging running back. I still would not rule out a return for AP if he tests the market and doesn't see what he likes. But I think he'll probably will end up with the Oakland Raiders, if I'm guessing. But the reason why the Vikings obviously lost Captain Marlin, who was a very good, serviceable corner for them, I just think they addressed needs and overpaid for it. They needed offensive line help for sure, and they signed 2 tackles, Riley Reif and Mike Remmers. Both these guys have found their success at right tackle, so they're going to have to swing one of these guys to an unnatural position at the left tackle spot. Is probably going to be Riley Reif, who's been He's been an average right tackle. Who knows what he's going to do at left tackle, but they signed him a 5-year, almost $59 million deal. So I believe they vastly overpaid. It's the market. I get it. But the fact that they paid almost $60 million for Riley Reif, and then they got Mike Remmers coming over from the Carolina Panthers. He was, average again. They signed him to a 5-year, $30 million. So they have almost $100 million in 2 tackles that are average. I get you have to address your needs. Maybe one of these guys wouldn't have been so bad. Obviously, I think Riley Reif is the better of the two. I think both these guys aren't terrible. They're definitely a big upgrade on the piece of shit that was TJ Clemmings last season for you guys, an absolute turnstile. And one of these guys had to come over and replace Matt Khalil, who you lost in free agency. But they're both predominantly right tackles, and you're going to have one of these guys swing. I assume will be Riley Reif moving to left, who, I think he started as a left, didn't work out, moved to right, and the Lions were able to make him somewhat serviceable last year. But I just think that is a lot of money for not a whole lot of talent for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's more so you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, having to re-sign in a weak tackle market. But that is a lot of money for guys that are, they're just solid. They're not great. Don't see a whole lot of upside there. So the Vikings are a loser, unfortunately, from that. Next up is the New Orleans Saints. The good is they released Jarvis Bird, and they freed up like $7 million of cap. And I did like the Larry Warford deal. I'm not exactly sure what the figures were. I think 4-year, $34 million. He's been pretty solid. I think he's been decent, and then had a really strong 2016. I mean, that whole offensive line last year from the Lions were vastly improved. So that is good dealings there. The Nick Fairley deal is not bad, but you got to talk about it. They got Ted Ginn, and why did they have to go and get Ted Ginn? What did they pay Ted Ginn? 3-year, $11 million. That's not that bad. But you had to get Ted Ginn because you traded Brandon Cooks to the Patriots. That's one of the worst trades I have ever seen. I get you have a disgruntled wide receiver. I get you need to move him. But I've already gone to death. I may have to make a single video just, to really get the fine-tunings of why this trade was absolutely terrible. The value's not that bad. You still got that first-round pick that you wanted. From that standpoint, it's good. But the fact that you fed him to a team that you're most likely going to have to go through to win a Super Bowl, and you're the Saints, you're in a win-now mode to win it before Drew Brees retires, you don't give it. I think I said on Twitter, you don't trade within your division, so the Saints should have the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Panthers off limits for trading Brandon Cooks. And then every single team should include the Patriots. You do not want to give the status quo of what it is, well, the playoff contender, the perennial Super Bowl contender. You do not want to give them any extra ammunition if you can. If you move him to the Titans, so be it. I mean, the Titans, that's probably a good move for them, and they certainly have a lot of upside. But the likelihood that you're going to meet the Titans in the Super Bowl versus the Patriots in the Super Bowl, if that is your goal, which is the Saints' goal, especially right now in this very small window that they have with Drew Brees, you do not give your competition that kind of ammunition. That was a terrible, terrible deal, and that deal alone. I mean, the rest of the Saints moves weren't that bad, to be honest. Fairly solid. Warford's not bad. A.J. Klein, Ted Ginn. I mean, they've been decent moves, to be honest. Not a lot of negatives, but that one trade with Brandon Cooks has absolutely soiled their offseason. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. I hope to God that they get the next, they hit on both their first-round picks at, what do they pick, 13 and 32 now? Basically, it's not even a first-round pick. Fuck. It's like a back end of it's like the beginning. That's pretty much a second-round pick. Bad, bad, bad. Next up on the list is the Buffalo Bills as a loser. I did like the Tyrod deal. I think, with Sean McDermott there, I'm pulling for them. I've never been a Bills fan, but I've always been a big fan of Sean McDermott. Pretty much the last prodigy under Jim Johnson's legendary Jim Johnson here in Philadelphia. And I do think that if they decided to go without Tyrod Taylor this year, it'd make it just even the growing pains even more substantial for him. And I thought the Lorenzo Alexander deal is good. 2 years, $9 million for a guy that might get double-digit sacks. Sure, he's up there in age, but he's found success in the system. So to limit the amount of turnover there on defense, I think that's a good deal. But the negatives is they lost Robert Woods. They cut Nickel Roby-Coleman, which is very surprising. And then their signings weren't that great. You signed two fullbacks. I mean, obviously you can get DeMarco, but bringing Tolbert in, I get the familiarity from the Carolina Panthers, but that was not a great move. Even though he wasn't expensive. But the move I just pretty much see is you lost Stephon Gilmore, which is a big negative. I thought for sure that they would try really, really hard to bring him back. And then you try to, compensate that with a Swiss Army knife in Micah Hyde, 5-year, $30 million. He got burnt in Green Bay. Green Bay had a terrible secondary last year, and he played all over the place in that terrible secondary. So, just from making a straight line comparison, they lost Stephon Gilmore, they lost Roby Coleman, and now they only really added Micah Hyde at what I think is pretty much overpaying for him. $14 million guaranteed. Sorry, Buffalo. You are, as it stands right now, a free agency loser. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. This is just more so they lost more than they can gain. The good move for them is they re-signed Drake Kirkpatrick. They paid him 5-year, $25 million, which would be a lot, but he definitely has finally got familiar with that system, and he was a pretty solid starter for them last year, so I don't think you could hold too much over them on that deal. They also kept Brandon LaFell on a 2-year, $9 million. That's a team-friendly deal, but their offensive line is going to be in shambles. They lost Kevin Zeitler. They lost Andrew Whitworth. Andrew Whitworth was probably not in their plans, but with the lack of Jake Fisher and Cedric Bouye developing, I think you still kind of hold on to Whitworth if you can for that, that Band-Aid, if you will, until you can properly get a tackle. Unless those guys, are a bust and you're done with them, maybe continue to let them to develop, because I don't really see starter in one of those two players. And Zeitler, obviously, you can't sign everyone, but now, dealing whatever they worked around their money. Now Andy Dalton is going to have a vastly inferior offensive line to what he had last year, and a team that likes to run the ball, which is much success as they really do have with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard as a 200 attack. I mean, that's going to be tough with all these moving pieces on the offensive line. You're able to get Eric Winston back. He's only 45 years old. I just think the losses to the offensive line is, you can't say the Bengals had a good offseason, so that makes them a loser. And finally, we're here with the losers. Arizona Cardinals. And again, very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals. Not necessarily what they did do, it's what they didn't do and what they couldn't afford to do. The good was they re-signed Chandler Jones, who, I would even think Chandler Jones is somewhat, a bit of a underrated player. He's, you look at all the pass rushing stats since he entered the league, he's top 5. So, I mean, paying what they get, I think it was $83 million. That's decent. That's probably a little bit below market value for the kind of production he's been able to get you. And they re-signed A.Q. Shipley, who's been a very solid center for them. That was a nice move. But the losses, obviously, these are almost irreplaceable losses as it stands right now. Calais Campbell gone, DJ Swearinger gone, Tony Jefferson gone. So pretty much they lost every safety. I assume they're going to have to move Honey Badger and keep him at the safety spot, which will kind of limit that if he can stay healthy. But, I mean, that is a lot of talent to lose on the defensive side of the ball. And like I said, this is really, I think this year is the last year in that Arizona Cardinal window for them to really challenge for, to be a legit Super Bowl contender, I think. And you're just starting to see it's a fucking, it's a jalopy. And you're trying to do a 600-mile trip across the country. And you're just slowly starting to get to the finish line here. and the pieces of the car are falling off. So as the car gets actually across the finish line, or is it going to collapse in a junk heap? We will find out, and that will be known as the 2017-2018 NFL season for the Arizona Cardinals. So those are the last losers. Like I said, most of these teams, it's a lot more so what they lost and what they. Best way to put it is there's positives and negatives so far for all these teams. So hopefully, if you're a fan of either one of those teams, you're not oblivious. You're probably agreeing with a lot of the things that I'm saying. Maybe a slight differentiation on evaluations, but the teams that I mentioned as losers, clearly they either fucked up or they lost more because simply salary cap. You had to work under that salary cap. But now we're jumping to the winners. Honorable mentions. We'll put the Philadelphia Eagles, which we'll talk in a separate video, so I don't want to make that one cut out 4 or 5 minutes from the length of this video. I like the moves that the Rams made. I think the Rams made some decent moves. They got Whitworth for immediate improvement to help Todd Gurley get to going there. They also got Robert Woods. I thought that was a nice signing as well. Just to talk. The Steelers did a lot of in-house business, tagging Le'Veon Bell, re-signing James Harrison, and extending Antonio Brown. Very nice moves there. The Texans, I didn't want to put them on a winner because they originally had that Brock Osweiler contract, so you can't award them for doing that, but the move that they did to get him off the books to hopefully free up a move for Tony Romo is a positive move. I also have the Washington Redskins. If you just look at who they signed and not who they lost, it was a very positive offseason for them. They got Pryor on a very good team-friendly deal. I guess you technically got Kirk Cousins to sign his tender. Who else did they get? They got a safety. Then they get DJ Swearinger. Can't remember off the top of my head. I should have the fucking notes out here, which I do have notes on most teams. Yeah, they got DJ Swearinger, 3-year, $13.5 million. They re-signed Vernon Davis. Those are still some positive moves. But then when you look at who they lost, and Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon most notably, I mean, that's a lot of offense. That's a lot of production to try to find and replace. And finally, the Jacksonville Jaguars, just because you can't, every year the Jaguars have the most money. They splurge the most, and it doesn't really amount to anything. So they made some great signings, Barry Church, Calais Campbell, A.J. Boye, but you have to wait and see what the end product's going to be there for the Jags before we can actually claim them winners. So jumping into my winners at number 1, we're going to start with the Cleveland Browns. They cleared $18 million in cap by releasing Tramon Williams, Josh McCown, and RG3. They re-signed Jamie Collins, which some people were expecting they might not be able to, more so from Collins not wanting to come back to Cleveland, less than how much money they could pay him, but they got him back on the books. They really built that offensive line back up again by re-signing Joe Bitonio, signing Kevin Zeitler and J.C. Treader, and they gave a second rounder by eating Brock Osweiler's contract. We still have to wait and see what they officially do with that Brock Osweiler contract, but I think all those moves are positive for the Browns, and now they're absolutely stacked in the first 3 rounds for the next upcoming 2 drafts, and if they still want to try to make a move for Jimmy Garoppolo, they have the ammunition to do so. The only negative is I do think they should have tried to, obviously, the Terrell Pryor deal, but I think they should have tried to, obviously you can match that, they have so much fucking money, but I think this was more of a Hugh Jackson was kind of letting Terrell Pryor go. Then it was more so the Browns not willing to match his price, but still losing their best offensive skill position player last year is certainly going to hurt them, I think. Another team that I consider a winner, kind of, I think the fan base may be a little disappointed, but I think they made 2 good signings. They got 2 positions in need and 2 solid players. That's the Tennessee Titans. Everyone wanted them to make that trade for Brandon Cooks. It's unfortunate they didn't get that to go down, but they signed Jonathan Cyprien and Logan Ryan, so they got a safety and a corner. Their defensive back was a major position in need. I still wouldn't, put it past them to go after maybe a Marshawn Lattimore in the first pick of the draft. They got 2 picks. They can do a lot of things here, but I really like these moves. They didn't overpay for either one of them. And I wouldn't say they're team-friendly deals, but both these guys are going to be starters for the Titans. I think those are nice moves there. Next winner is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens usually have an incredibly strong offseason. They cleared $15 million in cap by releasing Kendrick Lewis, Sharish Wright, Elvis Dumervil, and Ladarius Webb. And they re-signed Tony Jefferson, which was one of the best signings. He is a perfect fit to pair back there with Eric Weddle. They got Danny Woodhead, which, already on paper looked pretty decent. But now with the suspension of Kenneth Dixon, he's going to be able to do a lot. Pretty much everything, if not even improve, what Kenneth Dixon was going to be able to bring to that offense this year. They re-signed Brandon Williams, who's one of the best defensive tackles that was hit the market. Maybe on most people's boards was the top defensive tackle. And for considering how good their run defense was last year, you can only assume he was a massive part of that. And they picked up the option on Mike Wallace, who had a great year last year and was probably their top wide receiver. So all good positive moves from the Baltimore Ravens. The Tampa Bay Bucks are another winner. They cut Werner. They got some, I think they freed like $6-7 million worth of cap from that. They tendered Cameron Brate and Adam Humphries, who are 2 good young playmakers to work with Cam Newton. By Cam Newton, I mean, that's racist. Jameis Winston. The re-signed Jaquiz Rogers, which is nice considering, the uncertainty of Doug Martin's future is kind of up in the air. And then they got Mr. Jameis Winston some weapons. And it's a weapon. Single weapon, perfect fit, Deshaun Jackson. I think the price, I kind of disagree with the price. I think they overpaid a little bit for Deshaun Jackson, but for what he's going to bring to that offense to stretch the field and to help out Mike Evans and Jameis Winston is great. They also get that piece of shit Chris Baker, who's decent, and J.J. Wilcox at the safety spot. He's a big-time thumper who I assume that they will pair with Chris Conte, which is not too bad. Only move I didn't like was the William Golston. I think they paid him way too much money for his production, and that was a bad contract right there. Unless, Bucs fans can convince me out of it, I think that was a bad contract. Another winner is the Miami Dolphins. They cleared $12 million in cap space by cutting Mario Williams and Earl Mitchell. They extended Rashad Jones, which is a bonus. They re-signed Kenny Stills at below market value, which is great. They brought back Cam Wake on a 2-year deal because he's, he's ageless wonder, if you will, off the edge. And they traded for Julius Thomas, which is great. They were able to restructure his deal, which is even better. And to pair with Julius Thomas, they get Tony. We're going to call him Tony Fasano, who's one of the best run-blocking tight ends. So you combine both these guys, and you have a complete tight end. They traded for Will Hayes from the Rams, great edge rusher to pair with not Mary Williams, great edge rusher to take over for Mario Williams for the short term. And then they got Lawrence Timmons from the Pittsburgh Steelers to pretty much take over for Jelani Jenkins. I think that was a really, really good move for them. Only move I didn't like the Dolphins make was the kind of money they paid Andre Branch. I don't think... is it Andre Branch? Is that the dude? Or is that the guy that's on the... Yeah, it is Andre Branch. I'm thinking of Alan Branch. I think they paid Andre Branch way too much money, and they could have got better value elsewhere. But still a great offseason for the Miami Dolphins. Now for the second last one, it's the Green Bay Packers. I think they cleared $11 million in cap by cutting James Starks and Sam Shields. Good business from there. And then they re-signed Nick Perry, which is, that is the mantra of the Green Bay Packers when it comes to the offseason, to re-sign their own talent. And Nick Perry obviously was going to be a top edge rusher, I think, in terms of his age, and he's coming off a big year. So it was great for them to re-sign him. And then they went out and signed Martellus Bennett. So they got an upgrade over Jared Cook at the tight end position. Martellus Bennett on his path of chasing as many Super Bowl rings as possible. Now they have maybe the best tight end they've had during the Aaron Rodgers era. So that is a great pickup for the Packers. Good win for them. And the final free agency winners are probably the biggest winners. New England Patriots. They were able to sign Stephon Gilmore, so they got, in my opinion, the top corner in the market, while still holding on to Malcolm Butler, which I didn't have to give up for the Brandon Cooks trade. They re-signed Alan Branch, who was a very solid defensive tackle for them last year. We can only assume that Hightower's coming. That one's still up in the air, and I think if they lose Hightower, that will sting. But let's be honest, Hightower more likely will end up back with the New England Patriots. They traded for Dwayne Allen, so they got cover for Martellus Bennett. They traded for Coney Ely. They got cover for what they lost in Chris Long, and an upside, too, because Chris Long's old as shit, and Ely's still developing. And then, obviously, the Brandon Cooks trade, they absolutely fleeced the New Orleans Saints in one of the most lopsided trades I've ever seen as a football fan. So once again, the Patriots, good for them, man. It's about time they have a bounce-back year, and I'm glad that they're able to make these moves, and maybe they have a chance to compete for a title. Ha, ha, ha. Fuck my life. Patriot fans should be ecstatic. But there you go, guys. Those are my free agency winners and losers for the first couple days of free agency. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. Like I said, there are a couple honorable mentions. We didn't want to make it too long, but I will be doing an Eagles-specific video sooner than later. I'm thinking probably early next week when I release my new Eagles mock draft, which will be coming there. Well, so this is your first time stopping by. Don't be afraid. Hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.